My inspiration to write War on Our Doorstep and subsequent books was I came across Brian Garfield's The Thousand Mile War. And I thought, wow, this is a book very few people know about. I started to research it more, and I started interviewing veterans, and I wrote a couple of newspaper articles about the pollution campaign. And I got a lot of veterans phoning me up saying, why don't you write a book? We've got a lot of information. This came from veterans groups. We've got a lot of information that we think would make for a good book. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to try putting my thoughts to paper and just see how far along we can go. I assembled my sources, wrote a couple of articles for newspapers and magazines, and veterans groups and veterans themselves phoned me and emailed me, wrote me letters asking, this is a story that needs to be told. We've got photographs, we've got veterans you can talk to. So I thought, well, I'm going to put this to paper and just see how far along I can get the book. Found a publisher, Heritage House Publishing. It wasn't actually too hard to get on with them. I'd written a lot of articles for Diver magazine, and the editor and owner of that was Peter Vasilopoulos, well-known diver and spokesperson for the diving community. I called him up and I said, Peter, I've got this book I'm working on. Can you put in a good word with Heritage House about it? And he did. And yeah, they said, send us your manuscript. Did. They sent it back saying, we're interested, but it's a bit choppy and needs editing, professional editor. So my brother was had his degree in journalism from Carleton University, and fortunately, he took the book on and edited it for me. There was about another 5 edits after that once it gets to the publishing stage. But without those contacts, I'm not sure. I think it would have been a lot harder slog getting the book written. It also gives you a lot of credibility for magazine articles and future books. The book is out of print, but it is on-demand printing, where a bookstore will order it, and they'll have single copies printed up. I would and have actually considered what material there would be for a follow-up to War on Our Doorstep. And I have found items that I never put in the first book, or items that should be expounded on. For instance, there was a spy network in Vancouver, which I do cover in my first book, but I've since found other material. I could go on to that. There's the German merchant cruisers that came down through the Bering Sea and wreaked havoc in the South Pacific, making their way up the coast of South America. And there was POW camps that I never mentioned. Excursion Inlet, there was a prisoner of war camp up in Alaska. There was a prisoner of war camp at Fort Lewis down in Tacoma. All of these would be interesting topics, I think, for a follow-up book. There are interesting stories, some that don't lead anywhere, but others there's conspiracy theories about. For example, the submarine I-26 shelled, they weren't shelling the Estevan Point Lighthouse per se, they were shelling the radio direction finding station behind the lighthouse. There's conspiracy that, well, it was the Americans shelling the coast to draw Canada into conscription, but they didn't need a hoax to bring people into conscription. There's so much evidence points to the submarine shelling the coast. First of all, that the crew members did recall it, had interviews with them. It wasn't that big of a deal as far as battles go. The Japanese captain was interviewed in Ryukota, and he said he does recall shelling the coast. Other crew members have to remember that people get promoted, they get moved off, moved to other vessels. These people had the same story. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. They shelled it for a reason, and there have been shells found from Japanese shells found from the deck gun. There has been even Mackenzie King's diary makes note of that the coast was shelled. The Japanese attacked Dutch Harbor, Alaska in the Aleutian Chain over a 2-day period with carrier-launched planes. This was not exactly a Pearl Harbor, but it did damage. They hit Fort Mears, the Army base. They hit the hospital, and they killed 75 U.S. citizens in the attack. There's a photo of a section of a torpedo, and where this came from was the Fort Camosun after being torpedoed by the submarine I-25. I'd gone back to Ottawa to look up some material on balloon bombs, and was in their storage warehouse, which is really something else. A lot of stuff from various wars, World War I and World War II, Korea, missiles from Cold War. But this piece of torpedo, I'd seen it and seen the photograph of it. I went to Ottawa to look at some other stuff, and the curator there said, we have this chunk, it's supposed to be a chunk of torpedo that came out of a torpedoed boat on the West Coast. And I took photographs of it, looked it up in the newspaper at the time, and it was a part of the torpedo that was fired at the Fort Camosun by the submarine I-25. My latest book was Kiska, the Japanese occupation of an Alaska island. It deals with the Japanese coming to Kiska, taking over Attu, a sister island, and establishing bases there. This is the first action since the War of 1812, whereas a foreign force has taken over American territory. I got the inspiration to do that from reading articles, seeing World War II photographs. I had the opportunity to go out to the island as a biologist research assistant. Spent 51 days on Kiska. There's no one there. There's no other communication except for Adak Island, which has about 350 people on it and is a good 350 miles away. The book I have is about what the Japanese left there, their story. We found personal items, lots of ammunition, guns, parts of a diary. Canada sent contingents of Royal Canadian Air Force planes up to back up the Americans up in Alaska. At its height, the Canadians, the Royal Canadian Air Force, made up 1/5 of the air forces in Alaska. It didn't go well initially. There was a contingent of 5 Kitty Hawks that were flying from Cold Bay up to Umnak, which is where the new base was. The 5 aircraft got lost in the fog. 4 of them plowed into Unalaska Island, and 1 went down in the sea. It got going badly. They'd already lost 5 aircraft, and before they'd seen any action. This monument marks the attack by the I-25 at Fort Stevens. There was also attacks at Estevan Point and at Santa Barbara oil fields. They didn't do a lot of damage, but physical damage, but they did instill a fear along the coast finally. And it was this that caused blackouts to be made law. Before that, there was no concern for having to do blackouts on people's houses and that. Altogether, there was just under a dozen ships were sunk, and another dozen came under attack. Um, the Japanese also attacked shore installations in Hawaii and also up in Alaska. My second book was a condensed version of my first book, and it's titled Enemy Offshore. And it's what it is a part of Heritage House Publishing, their amazing stories series. And this is kind of the Cole's Note version of War on Our Doorstep. There's a lot of stories still to be told about World War II on the west coast of North America. I would actually have an interest in writing a second edition of War on Our Doorstep. There's some corrections to be made, but also other stories have come up since. It's just a matter of digging for them, and hopefully that comes to fruition one day.